Shiny. Super shiny. Need some powder. Makeup. Everything you wanted to know and plenty you didn't know that you never wanted to know and now will be unable to forget can be found in Bill Schutt's Cannibalism, a perfectly natural history. Better than food, man. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Better Than Food Book Reviews. I'm back on the coffee. Welcome to the new setup. It's actually much smaller than my other setup. This is my bed right here, and the kitchen's right there. It's just a studio, but I mean, this view, no? Yeah, pretty fortunate on the view. Very happy to be back on the coffee. I took 2 weeks off, the beginning of March, and was gonna do a month, and just hated it. Just felt like I was walking, just felt, retarded, just completely stupid and foggy, and more relaxed maybe, but ultimately the cons were so much worse than the pros. Not just because of the caffeine addiction, but I lost a lot of things that I really valued. Lost a whole community that I was interacting with for sure. And it felt like I kind of sacrificed a lot of productivity too. And, I like to work out, and caffeine is a fantastic workout supplement if you want to look at it like that. I also do intermittent fasting, and since we're on the subject of eating, and it definitely helps with that. It helps blunt your hunger. And so coffee, caffeine's fine, but coffee is magnificent. I love it. I really, really love it. But going off of it, really taught me how dependent we are as a culture on it, and and it taught me how I function off of caffeine. I had no caffeine, not just coffee. I just completely eliminated caffeine along with my girlfriend for 2 weeks, and I gotta say though, it would have probably gotten better if we did like a month, 2 months, 6 months. You don't need it to survive, of course. You don't need it to survive. But it's great. Coffee, I don't go to bars. I don't go out. I don't really I don't smoke. I don't drink. It's my only little vice. Not saying that as an excuse, but I really appreciate coffee. And going off of it taught me how much I do, When I travel, I also like to explore places through the coffee culture there. I like to seek out cafes in different neighborhoods and actually just go and kind of map out the city myself by walking it and finding the best coffee in the city. That's, I really enjoy that. And it's always been a very useful tool for getting the feel of a new place, of a new culture. Whether, in America or abroad, in Europe or Asia. It's really fun, So, long story short, I love coffee. I hope you guys are doing well. It's been a little... I hope you guys are doing really well. It's been a little while. Been in this moving process. There's a lot going on over here at Better Than Food. There's a lot of stuff going on. I'm really happy that podcast got a lot of great feedback. There's some stuff that I don't say in public that you can find out by donating an amount of your choice to the Patreon at patreon.com/booksarebetterthanfood. Story of the eye related. There's a lot going on with that. And that's all I'm going to say. But, you might be interested. So, Cannibalism. Today will be a rare non-fiction review of a book that my girlfriend bought me for my birthday. Cannibalism, a perfectly natural history. Thanks, honey. Love you. Bill Schutt is an American author and professor of biology at LIU Post in New York, and a research associate in residence at the American Museum of Natural History. This book is brand new, and you can listen to him discuss it in this interview I linked to in the description box below. His idea in this book is to show that cannibalism for many species is an evolved survival mechanism, which is not to say that he's defending it as a practice amongst humans. It's about 300 pages of substantial, good-natured, dad humor-laden historical and scientific anecdotes from someone who is technically, in their own right, a cannibal. More on that later. It avoids sensationalizing topics like serial killers and instead presents interesting evidence throughout history to show how it reached its posited thesis, like in the title, which is that cannibalism is, in fact, very natural. We start small and then proceed through the various forms of cannibalism because there's a little bit of a problem with definition. Like, if you eat your fingernails, if you bite your fingernail, is that cannibalism? Well, to some, yes, to some, no. And it's totally the mechanics of my own sick mind, but I just thought about it. Somebody who's into shit like water sports, is that cannibalism technically? Or like scat? We start small and proceed through the various forms of cannibalism, and then it explores the circumstances under which cannibalism manifests in nature, between insects, fish, mammals, and of course, humans. Some of it is exactly what you'd expect, and in the beginning it starts off slow. For example, you're wondering for some time what carnivorous cannibalistic tadpoles have to do with placenta eating or corpse medicine. Quickly, though, you begin to put it together, and it's just as fascinating as it is disturbing. Every decade or so, there's a surge of interest in cannibalism, maybe most memorably seen in films. You had Night of the Living Dead, and then Cannibal Holocaust and the subsequent knockoffs of the 70s, and then, of course, Silence of the Lambs and Hannibal Lecter. And maybe most recently, the French film Grave, or Raw, with Garance Marillier, as this timid vegetarian veterinarian turned lustful cannibal after being force-fed a piece of raw meat at a hazing ritual. It's a good time. Highly recommend it. Check it out. Garance does a fantastic job. She's vicious. For another fantastic French horror film that deals with cannibalism and features Vincent Gallo, check out Claire Denis' Trouble Every Day. That is an awesome movie. Very lynching, strange, but wonderful. I really loved it. There's just some imagery in that film that really stuck with me. Yeah, it's a magnificent film. When discussing cannibalism, everybody's mind immediately goes to serial killers, Ed Gein or Jeffrey Dahmer. And while they are mentioned in the book, because it's sort of unavoidable, it's not really discussed. And more horrifying to me, at least, than the individual isolated moments of cannibalism by serial killers are the moments in history when cannibalism was utilized to survive by more than one person, in fact, sometimes cities. Like in the outrageously horrendous case of Leningrad during World War II. Possibly one of the most disturbing, if not the most disturbing moment of recorded history in the 20th century. Organized mass cannibalism in order to survive a brutal winter during a siege. Women and children abducted and eaten. Not by zombies or a bizarre influx of serial killers, but from practical necessity by people who just before were quote-unquote normal. Pulitzer Prize-winning New York Times correspondent Harrison Salisbury wrote that once the harsh winter took hold, most of Leningrad's population was reduced to eating bark, carpenter's glue, and the leather belt drives found in motors. But there were exceptions. These were the cannibals and their allies, fat, oily, steely-eyed, calculating, the most terrible men and women of their day. As rumors of cannibalism swept the city, so too did reports of kidnappings. It was said that children were being seized off the streets because their flesh was so much more tender. Women were apparently a popular second choice because of the extra fat they carried. In the worst period of the siege, a survivor noted, Leningrad was in the power of cannibals. Just as ominous, perhaps, was the sudden availability of suspicious-looking meat in Leningrad's central market. The traders were new as well, selling their grisly wares, which they claimed to be horse, dog, or cat flesh, to these shoppers with enough money to buy them. According to numerous survivor accounts, meat patties made from ground-up human flesh were being sold as early as November 1941. And this reminds me of that Vice documentary in Liberia, the cannibal warlords featuring General Butt Naked. Not making this up. Guys used to fight in the Civil War in Liberia naked, save for their assault rifles, and would sacrifice children and eat their hearts. And I suggest you go and watch it. It's not a happy story. It's fascinating though. I remember being in school when we watched that documentary, and we were all just, if even a fraction of what was said in that documentary was true, and that was when the Vice style was really getting going, and they started really having a big online presence. It was outrageous. I mean, still, I haven't watched it in a long time, but if you are interested in the subject, and it's not for the squeamish, but that's a hell of a story. The really distressing thing is I don't think we're that far away from a similar situation here. At least not as far as we'd like to think. I mean, take Los Angeles, for example. It's a desert, one bomb, and, a week later, it's hell on earth. It does not take long for people to get hungry. Leningrad is certainly one of the darker moments in the book. Obviously, early cultures came into contact with cannibalism, and many, though not all, decided it was a problem that should be addressed. Currently, cannibalism is a big red flag in our culture, right up there with murder, rape, and incest. It just never seems to lose its taboo quality of biblical proportion. And speaking of the good book, the Bible has a lot to say about it. One of the most fascinating things about Christianity for me, somebody who's, I'm sad to say, pretty uneducated about doctrine and dogma, is the Eucharist. Viewed through a certain lens, it's ritual cannibalism of the flesh and blood of Christ. We may think of it as a metaphor naturally, but at one point, it was decreed by the Catholics that when this took place, you had to believe that it was the actual flesh and blood of Christ. This was called transubstantiation. I just bit my tongue. Is that cannibalism? Martin Luther of the Protestant Reformation had a big problem with this, and the conflict that followed from this dispute, as you could guess, was pretty nasty. Many have been killed over conflicting opinions as to what the Eucharist represented. And there are several very famous and interesting lines in the Bible about the flesh and blood of Christ. His famous offering it to his followers in the New Testament. Check it out. They are, of course, included in this book. He says, the following are two of the most famous passages from the New Testament. Now, as they were eating, Jesus took bread, and when he had said the blessing, he broke it and gave it to the disciples. Take and eat, he said. This is my body. Then he took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he handed it to them, saying, drink from this, all of you, for this is my blood, the blood of the covenant, poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. Matthew 26:26. Jesus replied to them, in all truth, I tell you, if you do not eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you have no life in you. Anyone who does eat my flesh and drink my blood has eternal life, and I shall raise that person up on the last day. For my flesh is real food, and my blood is real drink. Whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood lives in me, and I live in that person. John 6:53. Kind of spells it out. I love the Bible. The chapter Cannibalism in the Bible actually starts off with a quote by John Lurie. I had to eat a piece of Jesus once in a movie, John says, referring to being in Scorsese's The Last Temptation of Christ. If you're too young to know who John Lurie is, please immediately go watch Jim Jarmusch's Stranger Than Paradise or the brilliant cult show Fishing with John, which I think you can find on YouTube. That just came out of left field. I love that. That was just from a conversation the author had with John Lurie. I thought that was great. Bill has also taken the stance that the term cannibalism and the concept was used by imperialists like Columbus and the conquistadors from Spain to dehumanize the native populations of lands they conquered. His accusation was that the term was another weapon in the colonialist artillery, a powerful one, because he mentions that many people who actually wrote about the cannibals in the New World had never been to the New World. I haven't studied all the evidence or lack thereof for human sacrifice and cannibalism among the indigenous cultures of America. Though I will say the story is far less interesting without the rivers of blood flowing down the temple steps from the flesh offering to the Aztec sun god, Aztec priest with the heart. So if anybody reads the book and has a strong rebuttal, leave a comment below. Bicker amongst yourselves. A couple of months ago, I was learning how to butcher a pig in Portland, Oregon. I'm fascinated by the art of butchery, and this was just one more nail in the coffin. If it paid more, I would sign up immediately. That would be my career. I would be a butcher. It's like an anatomy lesson, a cooking lesson, a workout, and a horror film all at the same time. It's awesome. And of course, it's delicious. I didn't kill the pig, I just learned the basics of taking it apart. Many things stuck with me and on me that day, but one of the biggest was when my instructor said that we are actually extremely similar to pigs in terms of our anatomy. The big difference between us and pigs is a collarbone. Isn't that interesting? In fact, concerning the taste of human flesh, the real question we're all asking, but not out loud, let's be honest. The term long pig has become the most popular reference point to describe the supposed pork-like taste of human flesh. The oldest reference I could find comes from a letter written by Reverend John Watsford in 1847, describing the practice of ritual cannibalism practiced by the inhabitants of the Marquesas Islands, a group of approximately 15 Polynesian islands located around 850 miles northeast of Tahiti. But while the letter does represent the translation of a Polynesian term for the use of human flesh as food, there is no real mention of how it tasted. The Somosomo people were fed with human flesh during their stay at Bao, a tiny Fijian islet, they being on a visit at that time, and some of the chiefs of other towns, when bringing their food, carried a cooked human being on one shoulder and a pig on the other, but they always preferred the long pig, as they call a man, when baked. One of the strangest things in the book, like Bill mentions in the interview in the description box, is that for the longest time, medicinal cannibalism was frequently practiced in Europe. They used to do all sorts of weird shit. A lot of it goes back to the idea of the four humors by Claudius Galenus, if you know about that. That was an idea that was around for a long time. Considering how outraged the Spanish were upon learning about the man-eating behavior of the indigenous people of the Caribbean, one might assume that cannibalism of any kind would have been frowned upon, but that was certainly not the case. As it turns out, many Renaissance enlightened Christians from Spain, England, France, Germany, and elsewhere turned to medicinal cannibalism to treat a long list of problems. From kings to commoners, Europeans routinely consumed human blood, bones, skin, guts, and body parts. They did it without guilt, though it often entailed a healthy dose of gore. They did it for hundreds of years. Then they made believe that it never happened. Perhaps the most commonly consumed human tissue is blood, a substance that has, until fairly recently, been misunderstood. Until the 20th century, most of what we knew, or thought we knew, about blood could be traced to the 2nd century Greek physician Claudius Galenus, known as Galen. Physician to the Roman gladiators, Galen stressed the importance of 4 bodily humors: blood, black bile, yellow bile, and, the smoker's favorite, phlegm. According to Galen, keeping the body's humors in balance was the key to good health, both mental and physical. Unfortunately, this doctrine would become the party line for medical practitioners for well over 1,000 years, with Galen's followers routinely involved in serious bouts of bleeding, gorging, and purging, the latter from both ends. Yeah. Then there was stuff like corpse medicine, which gained popularity around the 17th century along with public executions. You would have stuff like skull moss. Human skulls not ground into powder were often left out in the air, where they served as the substrate for skull moss, a curative applied topically to stem bleeding and to treat disorders of the head. One set of directions showed just how easy it was to transform a skull into the medieval equivalent of a chia pet. He's got a little illustration there. Isn't that nice? Just scrape it off and rub it all over. However bizarre cannibalism amongst humans appears, it's fairly understandable, and is usually practiced for medicinal purposes, perverse moments of mental illness, humiliation as a form of primitive warfare, or in the case of emergencies, disaster, or war, a last resort. But when you get into other species like sharks, insects, spiders, and even mammals, shit gets really weird. Fast. For example, sand tiger shark offspring actually practice a form of in utero cannibalism. Only the strongest 2 survive because they're in separate oviducts in the body of the pregnant shark. The rest of the eggs and the little sharks are eaten by the strongest siblings, right? There's a whole bunch of eggs in one oviduct, and the one who eats the rest of them is the one who survives. You know, obviously it gets down to like the last 2, you know, and it's a war. Whoever survives is the one who lives. There's also a spider who sacrifices herself to her myriad offspring. She gives them the signal and then they swoop in and they eat her alive. And cannibalism can most certainly be found in plenty of mammals like lions and polar bears. In the book, it says only 75 species of mammals out of 5,700 are reported to regularly practice some form of cannibalism. I'm imagining this includes humans. As far as acceptable modern-day cases of human cannibalism in America, you have placenta eating, which as of late has gained popularity. In fact, you can take yours home, I think, in Oregon after you give birth. Our author, Bill Schutt, actually found a couple who enjoyed coming up with various placenta recipes. As they've had a lot of children, they've had many opportunities. So they got in touch and they actually offered to serve him some, and so he went to Plano, Texas to try it out. The first thing that came to mind wasn't the taste, it was the texture. Firm but tender. It was easy to chew. The consistency was like veal. The taste, though, had none of the delicate, subtle, beefy flavor of veal. Definitely dark meat, organ meat, I thought. But it wasn't exactly like anything I'd ever eaten before. It had a strong but not overpowering flavor. I swallowed Claire's placenta and picked up another forkful. It tasted very much like the chicken gizzards we'd fried up as college students. It's very good. The big idea was that there would be some medicinal benefits to consuming your own placenta. However, when all is said and done, the general consensus is that there doesn't seem to be any real nutritional benefits. So put the fork down. But why is it such a big deal if we want to eat each other, right? Well, there's these diseases called spongiform encephalopathies. Try saying that 5 times fast. And they kind of kill the whole party. The Donner Party, that is. The women and children among the Foray people in New Guinea suffered from this because they were taking part in funeral rites that involved consumption of the dead. The resulting symptoms of the disease were truly horrifying. These giant holes in the brain that could show up decades after the actual incident took place. The media sensationalized the discovery of this disease in the 70s, and Time actually printed this article referring to Kuru, the name of the disease, as the Laughing Death. In the eastern highlands of New Guinea, sudden bursts of maniacal laughter shrilled through the walls of many a circular windowless grass hut, echoing through the surrounding jungle. Sometimes, instead of the roaring laughter, there might be a fit of giggling. When a tribesman looked into such a hut, he saw no cause for merriment. The laugher was lying ill, exhausted by his guffaws, his face now an expressionless mask. He had no idea that he had laughed, let alone why. It was Kuru, the Laughing Death, a creeping horror hitherto unknown to medicine. As creative and disturbing as that passage is, it turns out to be not so true. It just rots your brain and you die. So, on that happy note, one more time. Cannibalism, A Perfectly Natural History by Bill Schutt. It's a fast read, well-researched, and it'll make great dinner table conversation. So it's better than food. Always remember, life is far too short to read bullshit, but plenty long enough to read Bill Schutt. If you would like to support the show and help me spread the word about great books, you can head on over to patreon.com/booksarebetterthanfood to donate an amount of your choice. And all of it really means a tremendous amount to me. Thank you so much to everybody who has supported the show. Hope you guys are doing well. Please subscribe. Stay tuned. Plenty of great stuff coming. Take care and have a great night. Ciao.